What's up, franchise people? Welcome to Coffee and Analytics. I'm totally juiced up on coffee because I've been drinking it all day. So it's really called Water and Analytics, and it was just on the cusp of maybe being beer and analytics. But, whatever your drink of choice is, go for it.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I can't, Siri. So welcome. So this week or this month, and I wrote this in the note, I decided to take a different pathway. I usually go into the data, and the data has been quite fantastic, to be frank. We know what candidates are saying or franchisees are saying, that it's taking them 6.4 months. It hasn't moved. I've started asking some franchisors about how much time it's taken from lead to close. I'm hearing 6 months, which I don't like. It should be 90 days. And so now you're talking about a year process of the funnel. The other thing I constantly hear is, and part of this comes back on the agencies or the suppliers who are navigating this. But I hear, I use digital agency X and they just sucked. Like, I got nothing. I say, well, you got to understand, you got something, they just don't know how to tell you what you're getting. And so if we only measure things in leads, then unfortunately, sign up for you will always be disappointed. Yes, there are magical brands where the lead flow is super steady and consistent, and selling franchises isn't hard because everything else about the business is really sound and solid. And so the baseline of the business is good. Therefore, the sales team doesn't have to do a lot. And to be lucky enough to land into one of those businesses is great for your franchise career. But this month, I wanted to take a step backwards and start talking about just the structure, that rather than diving into the data of sales process, let's dive into the process of lead generation so that we can really focus on how are we going to get more leads. And the reality is we can get more leads. We really want applications and deals, but we can get more leads if we start thinking about next year now. That's the insight. 6.4 months, sometimes longer if you're a higher investment. And so if you're going to invest in franchising, be prepared that it takes time and you have to be consistent with it. And it's very much like a locomotive, that if you get the engine going and then all of a sudden you stall it for, let's say you stalled it at 5 months, it just takes time to get that going again. And I think it's important to note that. A few things before I get into some of the depth of my notes, and to everybody that's watching, thanks for watching live. Feel free to use one of the commenting features, whatever tool you're watching on, if you have questions that you want me to dive into. I did get one response back from a franchisee that said, here's what I want you to focus on, which has nothing to do with this, which I'll address at the end. But obviously use the comment tool, and I'm happy to address anything and challenge me. If you disagree with what I'm saying, use that comment tool to challenge, and it's a public challenge. I've been challenged many times before. It'll be nothing new. So use that tool. So a few things that have come up in the last few days. One is I've really started thinking about education of what is franchising. Now, the mission of 1851 on the main site is to educate both franchisees and franchisors of how franchising works. And frankly, that's going to be a guiding principle that we're going to hyper focus in on getting better at. I don't think that's the mission of any other trade magazines within franchising. That's going to be our mission. Our mission is, how do we educate franchisors? And that's at every level. Because we signed a very established brand yesterday that we're going to have to lift over some rocks and find some wins. So they need help, just like the beginning businesses that are thinking about franchising their business. And then to franchisees, it's the same thing. So the question I've been asking franchisors or people, even suppliers, the question I've been asking on these podcasts I've been doing is, the day before you got into franchising, did you understand it? And these are sophisticated individuals who say, absolutely not. Like the reality is I didn't understand it. And so now you go down to the franchisee and you say, did you understand what franchising was before you got into it? And they're answering the same way. And so I could pull up any franchisor's website, and I don't know that I've found one that says, let's take a step back, let's educate the buyer of what franchising is, and then go to work telling them about what the offering is. I did a podcast with Guidant Financial yesterday. They have a great resource on their site on what is franchising. I was like, this is something that every franchisor should have, just so that the candidates can be educated. Now, this is the insight where I think the broker community has done a fantastic job of gaining lift, is that they are educating the buyer of what franchising is. So they're like, you guys don't have to do it. We're going to go do it. And then we're going to get commission when we send that deal to you, because we're going to manage that candidate. So I think we need to do better as an industry. We need to do better. Not I think. We need to do better as an industry of educating the buyer of what franchising is, and starting at that from a resource standpoint. So that's insight one. Another topic, if any of you watch FranX, I filmed that on Thursdays with Charles. The topic today was, are franchisors undervaluing grit, hustle, bootstrapping? And my opinion is yes. To be real, I don't have the solve to this. If everybody who is on this call, on this video, or watches this in the future, goes back to when you were starting your business, if you are a business owner, or you think about your founder's story, there's bootstrapping, there's hustle, and there's grit. Yet for a franchisee, we've almost eliminated that from the process, and we disqualify them by being underqualified financially. But I was talking to this guy yesterday. He owns a boxing franchise out of Australia, and he talked about bootstrapping and raising money. When he was done telling the story, I said, would you have qualified yourself for this franchise? And he said, no, it was not financially sound. Yet in his first year, he sold more memberships than any franchisee has done, because he got grit and hustle. And so I'm thinking a lot about this. Are we losing great candidates for financial reasons? And I don't have the solve. I'm thinking about it. Melting Pot, for instance, has done a wonderful job of taking general managers, and I've seen this various times where multiple franchisees have pooled cash together to help the general manager or manager get into business, and they've thrived because they had the hustle, the energy, the grit. They didn't have the money. You put them into business. Now they make money. Their investors make money. So what's the investor solution back for franchisees? Just something that has been top of mind. So education of franchise buyers, I think it's important to think through, how are we educating the buyer on what franchising is so that we can accelerate their pathway to becoming a lead? And then two, how do we start capturing some of those folks with grit and hustle, knowing that those intangibles might make them the greatest franchisee that's ever existed in our brand? So two things that I'm thinking about on top of what I wrote in the letter. Okay, so the winning process for lead generation, as I see it, goes like this: business viability, storytelling on your four walls, including your website. What's the story that you're telling, which we just mentioned? The ability to build and sustain buzz, and then how you process your candidates and the tools you give them to create positive decisions. So business viability. This is something that I think, unfortunately and opportunistically, happens far too often in franchising. Marketing agency X comes out and says, you say, I want leads. Marketing X says, well, we can get you leads. And they don't pause and they look at the viability of the business. And so I wrote down in this note, if you haven't seen it, what is the cost to open your business? That has to be sound. What are your AUVs? Which I'm still torn on. I don't love AUVs. I want someone that's going to come in. I want to be number one in your system. So I don't care what averaging volume is. I want to know what the highest volume is, but what are your AUVs? And when you think about the payback on those, is it strong? Which I'll talk about in a second. What are your first year sales? Like, are franchisees going to get out of the gate strong? If you're being really honest with yourself, if they're not, are you encouraging them to equip themselves with enough operating capital to get through year one? And then what is the payback period on the total investment? So I've been really studying the unit level economics on a deeper dive. I'm not ready to share what that data is in Coffee and Analytics, but I'm trying to come up with some sort of conclusion. But I was looking at a restaurant brand, it does a little bit north of $1 million. You look at the net profitability for corporate, it's somewhere in the 20% range. So corporate store should net $200,000 after taxes. Call that, we'll just use 40%. That might be higher, but you take out 40% off of 200, you're left with 120. And let's say you have to pay back the loans, your initial investment on a $500,000 investment. So you need another $20,000 to $40,000 paid off. That leaves you with a real cash on cash return of $80,000. And so you think about the work that goes into managing that fake restaurant in this scenario to end up with 80 grand in your pocket. Is it worth it? I don't know. But if you've qualified that candidate to be able to open up 3, 80 times 3 is now pretty attractive. You're making $250,000 a year. That's good money. You own the business. There's an asset that you're going to be able to sell. You pay off that asset. They turn into a greater asset. So I like that model if you can scale the business, but far too often the viability of or scalability and viability for that franchisee is limited. Therefore, the odds of becoming a wealthy franchisee diminishes. So I say that because oftentimes brands say, go get me leads, which there's plenty of marketing companies that will take your money. I tend to pause and say, let's understand the viability of the business. Now I'm going to give you recommendations on how you can fix it. It doesn't mean I'm the be all end all when it comes to it. I just have a point of view on getting this into the right operational model and mindset. And then now that we've structured it, now when we go do lead generation, we're fairly confident that we've engineered something that is quite magical. And so when I say business viability, I think all of you need to constantly go back to what is the business viability. And let's say there's a scorecard 1 to 5 for easy math. If you're a 1, then increase your budget by 5 times. If you're 5, then decrease your budget by 5 times. There's some math there. And we're not even talking about validation. We're just talking about the viability of the business. But you got to think through that because that does create swings in lead generation. It will go up or down based on the viability of your business. And frankly, if franchisees can't make money at it, then they're not going to scale, and that's going to create a gap. I think back to Popeyes had great growth, probably 2010 through 2015, where all their franchisees were swallowing up more. Because every time you bought a new location, you knew the viability of it. When one of our friends, Jennifer Durham, was at Checkers and Rallies, and the executive team was just crushing it, franchisees were swallowing up more. And so I think the number one indicator of the strength of the business viability is if franchisees are swallowing up more locations, then you probably have something that is pretty viable back to other franchisees that could get into the system. So there's a really good insight in that. That's the business viability side. We've crossed that off the list. We've looked at the business viability. We've scored it. Now let's get into storytelling and the ability to build and sustain buzz. And for anybody new that's joining in now, again, the process here that we're trying to go through is how are we going to go get leads? So understand the business viability. Now let's do the storytelling. So symptoms of low lead generation goes like this. Soft audience focus. If I say, who's your persona? You're like, we want passionate people. Everybody does. So you need to understand who your audience focus is. Low traffic. If you look at your development site and you have low traffic, unfortunately, low traffic equals low leads. And the last thing is low conversions means there's a gap. If you have the traffic, they're not converting, probably a gap in the why you, why now. There's a gap in the way that your form behaves, and there's a gap in the way that you're telling your story. So it's very easy to start there. Like if you're trying to get back to let's do really strong blocking and tackling, you start with what is our audience? And if we're soft, we got an issue. What's our traffic look like and what do our conversions look like? And if you have a gap or a hole in any of those, you got to fix it. And so in order to build a system that turns traffic into customers, franchisees, you're going to have to build a steady level of buzz outside your website. You're going to have to make sure your website is strong. So building buzz is quite easy for a franchise brand. Like it's not that hard to find franchise stories. You have signings, you have openings, you have milestones, you have business updates. I recommend every quarter you build a business update that says this is what happened last quarter. And so now you take all these great messages, you build them out to the right audience, and now you start building this buzz. And so now all of a sudden you can arm your business with the right storytelling that's going to get people excited about what the credibility of the brand is. This is where the value of PR comes in. A long time ago, we took a brand, we looked at all the leads that they get in. They got high volume leads, and the conclusion wasn't brain surgery by any means. Weeks we got press, leads go up. Weeks we didn't, they went down. And you can see the chart; it just went like that. And so what that showed us is a few things. One, we have to try to get to how do we keep the client in the media 52 weeks a year. But then we also had to make sure that we're distributing that press and making it count. And so now we're talking about storytelling, website, and the ability to build and sustain buzz. Very easy from a process standpoint. Signings, press release. Openings, press release. Milestones, press release. Business updates, press release. So just make sure that's going into your process so the consistency of building buzz is there. Now we get to the candidate tools. When someone comes onto your website and you've led with your why you why now are you giving them the educational toolbox to be able to figure out what is franchising and why they should franchise with your business? So the two things that I recommend is, do you have a downloadable brochure that is more of an information guide? Not like, look at a recap of what's on our website. It's more like, could be a workbook, could be 5 successful franchisees. And the reason you want this is because in those 6.4 months, you want to create other opportunities to come get content from you and to revisit your website before they become a candidate. And so now you think through retargeting. Retargeting, in my opinion, is the smartest form of advertising that exists. Now, most of the ads that come up in retargeting are just regurgitating what was already on your website. I like to see retargeting you get really sophisticated. I like to see where you didn't fill out the form. Now let's try to drive you back to the form. But in non-sophisticated model and the very simplistic, like doesn't break the budget retargeting, I like that retargeting to say, go download this document that we just talked about. And so now I've come to your website and I'm paying money to try to get you back. And so why is it valuable? Because they've already come to your website. They know who you are in some sense, and you're trying to get them back. And when you get them back, you know that you're inching one step closer to pushing them over the edge to fill out that form. So retargeting, essential in the lead generation funnel, especially known in 6.4 months. And then, are you clearly showing a pathway to solve the pain point of the buyer? Are you clearly showing a pathway to solve the pain point of the buyer? So think about who your buyer is. And so are you giving them more time with their family? Are you showcasing scalable franchisees? Are you showing former business executives who are like, I know I own a business. I know owning a business is stressful, but I felt better, healthier in this model. What are you giving them to show solving their issue? I think this misses so often in franchise positioning because we're so conditioned to sell and we're all about getting leads. And frankly, it's almost like function over form, because we're not telling the candidate what we want to solve. And so this is some of the stuff that I think helps you build your foundation. And I don't think it's overwhelming. Again, process-wise, what's the viability of your business? Do you have a viable business? Like, really, no bullshit. Is your business viable? If it isn't, if it's going to take a 5-year payback, or there's gaps, or in your gut, you're like, I don't know that I would buy this. I don't know that franchise sales can solve that. It's more probably an operational issue. I don't know that franchise sales raising your hand and saying, hey, I have 2 cents on this. This is what we could do better as an organization. I don't know that people are going to listen to you. But if you know that you don't have as strong of a business as maybe a competitor or another brand that has a similar investment, then be honest about it. That helps set the tone for what lead generation is going to look like. Like, if business X that isn't viable and business Y that is, each spend $20,000 in franchise marketing, which one do you think is going to do better? We know the answer, but we put pressure on our marketing agencies to say, go solve this magically with Google ads. Doesn't work. Promise you, it doesn't work. Next thing is the storytelling. What's the story that tells on your website? Are you giving the tools to the candidate on what franchising is? And are you maintaining steady, sustainable buzz around the web, on PR, in your content, in your drip campaigns? Are you doing that? If you're not, start doing it. And then the candidate tools, what's the downloadable brochure? And are you clearly showing a pathway to solve a pain point of that buyer? And so some of this stuff is very, very, very important, because in order to get leads is such a weird word. In order to get these leads, you got to have that stuff. And so many brands don't. And then they're like, where are my leads? And so you got to get some of this going. So thus, and I said this, I would encourage you to spend a little time this month thinking through all of this, as well thinking about an adjustment to your message come the holiday season. I keep going back to this. We're getting close to it. Family. Ads with family. PR of family. They're at home with your families. This is the time that they make the decision that in 2024, they're going to be a franchise owner. So make sure your messaging gets sound. And then I would use the rest of this month as your reset month. Don't cut off your digital ads. You don't want to do that. Dial back. Say, let's gear up for Q4, and know that everything you do in Q4 is actually going to hit in Q1, which if you get out of the gates in Q1 and you feel pretty good, and your leadership team sees you get out of the gates in Q1 and it feels pretty good, then in turn, your life is going to be so much easier in 2024. You'll look like the superhero of franchising, and you have a shot at winning at franchise development. So that's the bulk of today's conversation. The one comment that I got from a franchisee, totally in left field, but I'll spend a minute addressing this. He wrote me, he goes, your topic, in essence, your topics suck. It's not about marketing. We don't have a marketing issue. We need to 10x our employees. Okay, why do employees leave a company? They hate their boss. They don't make the money that they want to make. There's no upward mobility, or they can't grow in their career. And now the new one is the philosophical viewpoint on work from home isn't in alignment. And so if you want to attract great staff, you've got to figure out, do you answer those? And then you got to hire people who match those. And if you have the mindset of hiring culture ads, like, do they add to your culture? Good people should come with good people. It's very easy to see that in an organization. If you hire someone and they can drive someone else into your system, that tends to help offset some of the employee challenges. I would be lying to you if I said working with employees is easy. I remember this is probably back in 2009. We were working for Huddle House. I was in a meeting with a consultant. I said, what did you do? He said, I used to own an agency. I said, well, what happened? And he goes, I just got burnt out of working with people. And I was like, I remember walking away from that and saying, man, what an idiot. Why would you do that? You should be blessed to have it. 15 years later, I understand what it feels like to try to figure out this puzzle piece of creating happiness for your staff, motivating your staff, holding your staff accountable, and driving them to better outcomes. At the end of the day with our business, I mean, every bit of our energy is around how do we delight the client? And I will continue to be unapologetic if someone isn't delighting the client, even though sometimes clients are like, hey, you have some turnover. I don't care. I'm 100% focused on delighting the client. And if someone doesn't fit into that and align with our core values, then we move on. I think that's important for anybody that's trying to figure out this employee process. Now, the leadership books all say it: hire slowly, fire fast. It's right. It's just really, really hard to follow that. Like, when you need a body, you need a body. And sometimes when you think about firing someone, I think about it all the time. I've had people that don't align with our core values, And I'm like, we should make an adjustment. And we don't, because I'm worried about fallout with clients or fallout internally, like who's going to do their work. That impacts some of our decisions. So if you're trying to navigate this employee thing, take your time, try to find the right people, give them the tools to win, encourage them, give true, honest feedback, and then let them tell that story out to all those other folks that you are recruiting. I did it again. I talked for almost 30 minutes. It's 25. Hopefully you got some value out of this month's Coffee and Analytics. For most of you, some of you, 110 of you, I'll see you in Chicago on Monday at our first Fran Camp. Super pumped about it. For those of you that aren't attending, we hope you come in the future. Our camp counselors, as we call it, who will be leading masterminds, have whistles. They have stopwatches. We have great alcohol and Cubs game and trolleys and business planning. And I promise that everybody that's coming is going to walk away with some really solid takeaways. If you're not coming Fran Camp, send me a message. We'll make sure you're on the list. We're launching regionals next. And then we're going to try to make this at least two times a year, maybe 3 times in the way that we're planning for this. But that's another episode of Coffee Analytics. See, Guy and Nicole, thank you for posting that. See you there. I'll see you guys there. Very much looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome. This is another episode of Coffee Analytics. It's been my privilege and my honor to talk franchising with you for 30 minutes. Have a great rest of the week, everybody. Good luck as we hit Q4, and I'll talk to you later. See ya.